Hey guys, it's Emma. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a bit. I'm not going to give a super huge disclaimer, but I am a student and I'm sorry I've gone for so long. Hopefully I will be back soon working on editing those college videos once I take my ACT. So now that we got that out of the way, I have one more thing before we start, which is February, as I hope you guys know, is Black History Month, which is all about uplifting voices of Black people and their stories. I would like to highlight and shout out some Black creators that I really like down below in the description. So if you can, I'd really recommend checking them out. And happy Black History Month to all my Black viewers. So without further ado, let's get on to my book review, what I've read so far in 2023. I'm going to be talking about six books, I think, and just giving you a little review. Don't worry, this will be spoiler free, so hopefully this will help you figure out something new to read or point you in the direction of something new that you might like, or maybe you just like listening to people talk about books. So if you are interested in any of that, please leave a like down below. When I say I have filmed this video 3 times before, I've filmed this video 3 times before. I have no idea what's going on with my camera. The audio is really bad on the other one. I really hope it's not ruined on this one as well, because then that will make it a 4th time. So please give it a like if you enjoyed any part of this. And without further ado, let's get right on into it. Okay, so I am pulling up my books on Goodreads, what I've read so far. And so we are going to be starting with In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. And now I hope I'm saying this right. I have no idea. I'm gonna go with Capote because that's what my English teacher said. But this book was actually a for-school book that we read in one of my AP classes. And it was definitely interesting, and I count it just because I did read it, obviously, even though it's still a school book. I think it was good. I actually gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone if they like true crime or kind of just like nonfiction. The one gripe I have with the book is this is kind of a little nuanced, so hopefully this makes sense, but the literary nonfiction is what Truman Capote calls it, like, because it's based on a true story, but it's like a journalist's recreation, I guess, because he talked to a bunch of these people. But in my opinion, there's really no such thing as literary nonfiction, because even in this book, his biases kind of shine through very clearly in what he chooses to include. And so while I don't think this is true nonfiction, because nothing can really ever be, I still think it is a very interesting, I'd like to label it more as realistic fiction. I think if you like true crime or like journalistic writing, because it is true to real life, because this is a real story, like, don't forget that. I guess it's not realistic fiction either because of that, but I would definitely recommend it if you like anything like true crime, or if you like books like, I know I read Just Mercy and it was kind of similar, not exactly the same, but if you kind of like that realistic journalist genre, then I would definitely recommend this one. Okay, so our next one is Little Women. I loved this book, and I know this is such like a classic, so I hope a lot of you have read this, ended up reading this, but I really love this book. I gave it a 5 stars, surprise surprise, and I actually ended up reading this at the beginning of the year because I got a copy from Louisa May Alcott's house when I went to visit, which was literally the coolest thing ever. And so I just really loved this book. And one thing that I think is really special about it is, I know some people find like books, like old classics like these, quite intimidating, but I think Little Women has a very low barrier to entry, which I was pleasantly surprised by, because I had read it when I was younger, but I wasn't exactly sure like what I was getting myself into, if that makes any sense. So I was very pleasantly surprised by how easy it was to read, because I know some people can find like the language and the structure of old books daunting, like for example Jane Austen or like Charlotte Bronte are 2 authors that I know a lot of people find really intimidating, because it's kind of hard to keep up with the reading because it isn't exactly phrased like how it would be today. But I was surprised at how accessible Little Women was, which I always knew I loved it, but I just was pleasantly surprised by how easy it was to read. I think this is a really low barrier of entry if you're one of those people that have always wanted to read classics but have never really gotten around to it, because like I said, they can be kind of intimidating. This is the book for you. Like, please read it. And another thing that I found really interesting was how like effectively it transcended time. Like, all the lessons were still completely applicable. All the characters were so interesting, like you could always relate to them in some way. Like for me, I know I really love Jo and I love Amy. I love all of them, of course, though. But I just think it is such a masterpiece. I mean, it's a classic for a reason, let's be real. And I would really, 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 really recommend this. It is super good, super accessible. And I'm not just saying that, it really is. Like, if you're looking for a classic that is very easily digestible and that still very much rings true today and still doesn't feel outdated despite the fact that it is quite old, I would really recommend this. All right, so our next one is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So let me tell you about this one. You guys probably already know because if you watch my Christmas book haul video, it was in there. If you haven't, I'll like link it above. But basically, this book is kind of like Picture of Dorian Gray, Immortality, because the premise is that Addie has, like, she lives forever, but everyone that she meets is cursed to forget her. I just realized my heater was on in the background the whole time. So sorry if that was annoying. So basically that's the premise. I gave this one a 4 stars. I would really recommend. It's very well written and it isn't very like YA. It just kind of feels like a middle adult novel. You guys know what I'm talking about. I feel like there are many books that kind of fit perfectly between adult and YA where they don't exactly feel like young adults, but they also aren't fully like adult novels, and I would definitely say this is one of them. It's very accessible. I found it super good. The writing was amazing, and I think that it did a really great job of delivering on that initial premise, especially because I think that the premise, the author knocked it so far out of the park. Like, are you kidding me? That's such an intriguing premise that everyone forgets her. And this book not only had a good premise, but then executed on that premise, which I thought was literally so good. The ending was so satisfying. I'm not going to say what it is because obviously I'm not giving you guys any spoilers, but seriously, I would so recommend. It is so good. And the characters are just so relatable. And it also makes you think a lot about like Addie and her choices and decisions. Like, it makes you think a lot, but it's also like okay, so it is thought-provoking, but it's enjoyable at the same time, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not meant to make you have to have an existential crisis, but you do end up questioning things while reading it, which I found kind of enjoyable because it made me like think about immortality in different ways, which I know sounds like randomly deep for just like a novel, but I really liked it and I thought it was really good. So I definitely recommend if you like any sort of like, even though I say YA, like I said, it kind of fits in the genre in between. I would recommend it honestly for like any ages. Addie is super cool. It's a really nice story and I thought it was kind of a fast read, although it is a bit long from what I remember. Okay, so next is actually my first book on the list that I was not the biggest fan of. I'm so sorry to fans of this book because I know that it is quite popular, but this is the Jane Austen Society, and we read this for book club and I really just was not a fan. I actually gave this a 2 stars on Goodreads. I'm so sorry if you're a fan. But basically this book is very much like a character-driven book, but what makes it kind of difficult for me is it's very much like, I remember when it got proposed to our book club, it was like labeled as like a cozy book, but I feel like there is not much substance behind it, is what I'm saying. Like, when you're reading it, like, character-driven stories can work, right? Like, for example, Little Women, which I know is kind of an unfair comparison because Little Women is a classic, but bear with me for a second. It is very character-driven, but it's also entertaining and you're invested in the characters and the events. And for this book, all the characters were kind of, I found them predictable. They weren't very deep or nuanced, and the events that they were pushing forward, like in the plot, were not very intriguing either, in my opinion. And I feel bad because I know some people kind of like this book, but it was just not the book for me, completely personal preference, and I just did not like the pacing of it because there literally felt like there was none. It was so slow, like so slow. And I know some people kind of like that, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of guessed all the character arcs from the beginning. Like, I thought everything was predictable, and while there were like maybe like 2 twists and turns, those weren't like executed well enough for it to like transcend throughout the book. They kind of just happened and you were like, oh, that's interesting. And then all the characters went back to just like living their lives. So I would not recommend. However, if you are looking for like a cozy book that's kind of easy to read, easy to digest, maybe check this one out. But I would definitely say approach with caution. It is definitely not deep. It is not, which, don't get me wrong, not everything has to be deep, but if anything, I think it's like overly shallow. Which I feel so bad about because I know so many people like this, but it just has like no substance. And don't get me wrong, I'm not always looking for books that are like super nuanced and deep, but like this was lacking basic necessities in my opinion. So I would not recommend this one, but like I said, if you're kind of interested in a book that you don't have to like think a lot about while reading it, maybe this is the book for you. I don't know. You guys will have to let me know what you think about this one in the comments below. Okay, so next is Caraval, and I really, really, really liked 95% of this book. And I know you guys are gonna be like, Emma, why 95%? Like what? And let me explain. So I actually ended up giving this a 4 stars because I loved, like literally, like I said, 95% of the book, but the ending was just so bad. I cannot, it makes me so mad. Okay, so basically the first 95%, the pacing was so good. It even made me think about like my own book, because I always get feedback like, oh, your book's moving a bit slow. This one is not a problem. You can fly through this so fast. It is like event, but it still works, and it's written really well, and I really loved that about it. The characters were very interesting, and it was great. But then literally, like I said, in the last 5% of the book, the ending felt like a cop-out, and I'm not gonna give you spoilers on like what actually happens, but it felt like such a cop-out. And while it does work technically from like a book perspective, like within the canon of this book, because the entire thing is about like true or false, like nothing's real. So like technically you can come up with whatever ending you want, but I just felt like it copped out of so many like plots they set up and all the like tension they had been building the whole book. Like, ugh, it just made me so disappointed. So I gave it a 4 stars for the fabulous rest of the book, but not 5 because of this ending. It literally makes me so sad. It makes me so mad. So I will probably not be reading the second one, but let me know if you guys think that is like better and maybe I should give it a second chance, because I did really like the author's reading. I just cannot get past the ending. I have no idea what's going on over there. I don't know if that's just me. You guys will have to let me know what you think if you've read it. Okay, so last we have Radio Silence, and this is a book kind of about like, it's very YA is how I would describe it, but it's also like kind of chronically online is another way I would describe it. It does a great job, which I'll elaborate more on this as I talk about it, of like integrating the internet in the story, and I think the main characters are kind of interesting. And so I gave this a 4 stars on Goodreads, and basically it's kind of about like this podcast, and it's very much about like teenage relationships, but then it also focuses a lot on like the pressures of higher education, going to university, etc., which I thought was a really interesting kind of subject matter. Although I will say the way the author kind of like portrayed it. Okay, so everything in this book, it's kind of like a caricature. We were talking about this in book club. Every character is like over the top exaggerated, like their motivations, what they want. Like it is very much like a caricature. Like they don't feel necessarily real, but I think it works, especially in this book, because the author is very much trying to like prove a point and have you think about this plot in the book, like have you, you know, like provoke some thought. So I don't really mind it. Like a lot of the scenarios are very over exaggerated, a lot of the characters are, but I feel like it works for like the message that the author is trying to put across. So I don't mind it, but if that's something you maybe like don't like, if you're looking for something a bit more realistic, or like at least a bit more realistic of characters, then maybe I wouldn't recommend. But the other thing that I really thought was really interesting about this book is how, like I said, it's chronically online. Like, so basically this author I think does a really good job of incorporating like the internet's influence. I know it's set in like early 2011, I think. So it's definitely like that Tumblr era of the internet, but I think she does such a good job of making the internet like such a vital part of the book, because I know especially for me when I write, I mean, my book takes place in like modern days. So like I'll have technology as like a little, you know, throwaway device for like characters to communicate or whatever. But I think this book does a really good job of actually portraying like how it affects, not affects, but the people that use it, I guess. Like how chronically online a lot of teenagers are, like how a lot of their life revolves around that, getting into like the social media space. Like it's just quite interesting. And I feel like I haven't read a book like this where the technology, instead of being like used as a device, is kind of like the center of it, which feels weirdly relatable, but also like new. I think it definitely is interesting because that is how a lot of teenagers live, and I think it's probably honestly worth a read just for that. Like it's also very fast because she uses that as a device, because the chapters are very short. Some of the pages are only like text messages, but it actually works, which I was kind of surprised by, because I mean, you wouldn't think that would be like a particularly riveting book, but I think it's almost worth a read just to see like how she integrates it into the story. And I was definitely kind of taking notes like, oh, this is kind of cool how she does this and this. So I definitely recommend it if you like YA, and if you're just looking for like a kind of character driven story. I also really do I found myself liking the higher education, like the pressure themes. I mean, I definitely found that I could relate to it. So maybe like if you're like a student, you'd find this relatable as well. But yeah, I would probably recommend this one for any YA enjoyers, or probably any students as well. Or if you're just intrigued by my whole description of the technology implementation, which I don't know if I described it well enough, but I honestly think it might even be worth a read just for that. So that is it for my 2023 books. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you made it all the way to the end, please give a like and subscribe. Like I said, I filmed this video literally 3 times, so please help me out. Also, I am not exactly sure when I'm going to be back. I mean, you guys already know this. I'm not going to give a whole in-depth explanation, but I'm a student, I'm busy, I have lots of school to take care of, lots of things to do, but hopefully once I take my ACT, I will be back with those college tour videos I've been talking about forever. Fingers crossed, but hopefully I'll see you guys soon. And also, do not forget, it is still Black History Month, and if you would like to support any of the Black creators I linked down below, please go check out their YouTube, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.